What's up, guys? My name is Fari, and I build systems that remove bottlenecks within businesses. And I've been documenting my builds for 136 days now, going all the way up to 365. And in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the journey from the initial goals that I ultimately set and the results that we've ultimately gotten as a result from those goals. So far, what's worked so far, and what we've been able to achieve so far, and also what is next. So basically, taking a look at the next step, what I'm actively just going to be working a lot more on this journey of just documenting and building each and every single day. And I think this video is going to be a super detailed one and super tactical as well. I want to get super tactical in terms of how I'm actively thinking about this and approaching it as well. But if we look at the initial goals that I ultimately set out from the beginning, it was ultimately to build out the daily cadence, basically posting each and every single day. The main goal was to post for 30 days, and then I thought after those 30 days, who remembers the guy that recorded for 30 days and then stopped, but they remember the person that did 100 days and then stopped. And then I got to 100 and I was like, okay, cool. So no one really remembers the guy that did 100 and then stops, but they ultimately remember the guy that did 365. So this is actually supposed to be 365, but yeah, whoever does for a year. So that's why I decided to kick it up for a year, because I wanted to also be able to build the OS that ultimately powers the builds that we ultimately have. And I think that is one of the most important things that I also just wanted to take an approach of when I was taking a look at building out these daily videos. Because when I first started, I was looking at it from a perspective of how can we build somewhat of a documentation machine that ultimately powers how we're then able to think and build this operating system that ultimately powers how we're then able to build systems to the highest order. And I think this is something that initially I had a grasp of, but then starting to do the daily videos each and every single day, I think that is something that has ultimately grown over time, and has also forced us, or been a forcing function in terms of thinking in real time, and also seeing what works, what doesn't work, and also getting those data points that ultimately allows us to then scale the level of impact that we ultimately have. And as well as understanding that I just wanted to connect with cool people building cool things as well, and to really connect with a lot of people that I within my network did not have. And that has somewhat worked to an extent, just being able to learn a lot more from people that I never probably would have imagined I'd be having on as guests, but ultimately scaling that as well in terms of the conversations that I've been ultimately having on the daily videos as well. I think that was one of the things that I also just wanted to somewhat play with and experiment as well, is to how I would enjoy, or how valuable the conversation would be for people watching. So now that is something that I've been fortunate enough to do, and I want to just continue scaling that into the future. And that means having initially the goal was to have 10 plus conversations, so not just doing these solo videos each and every single day, but somewhat having also conversations with people that can just share some source, and ultimately expand my network as well, being able to expand the reach and knowledge that I may think I may have, that just expanding that as well, because you only know so much before you have to expand and like get more knowledge, and seeking knowledge from other people that are also crushing it in the game. And that was one of the things that I also just wanted to go super deep on, in terms of just understanding that there's so many people out there on this in the space that ultimately are doing cool things and building cool things as well. And I just wanted to connect with those and ultimately have conversations, to just sit down, just jam, and ultimately pick their brains, and also just show this to people that would ultimately want to get started as well. And also just to get like 1,500 views in the month. And I think that was something that we did crush, and I posted that up on my X, where we were able to get 1,500 views in one single month. Now we're averaging about 500 in a month. We're getting about 500 in a month, so it's 100% gone down, but ultimately that is something that has been somewhat good in terms of how we've been able to do it so far. So the results that we've been able to get so far, we can just look at this graph first. So in this selected period, so within these 136 days, we've been able to cross 3,757, but we'll just say 3.8k views, which I don't think is bad. For example, because I'm still like getting known inside this space, and systems is not one of those things that is easily something that you can scale in terms of content, at least from the way that I see it. It takes a select target person that we ultimately gets what it is that we're speaking about, and now it's just more so just understanding that, which in the beginning I had an idea in a sense of, but ultimately just understanding that the content that I'm posting needs to be super valuable to the specific people that I'm ultimately speaking to. And one of the things that along the journey when I was building and getting a lot of getting those videos down initially, was that I thought, hey, I'm not getting those many views, but ultimately I realized that one of the things that ultimately comes as a result from posting this kind of content is that you just network, or you connect with people that ultimately share somewhat of the same build or mindset, and that is ultimately something that you don't have to get 100,000 views for. It's just more so just speaking to the right people and doubling down on that. So we've been able to do 135 plus videos excluding this one, 3.8k views and 13 conversations. And these conversations have been somewhat super tactical, and I want to just make sure that we're just scaling these conversations and making them more valuable, so that we're ultimately scaling the source that they ultimately bring, and also just learn a lot more, because I believe you can always learn from a lot of different people, and you can learn different ideas that you can then recognize patterns from, and also implement in terms of what we're building as well. And I want to just have more conversations and ultimately scale those conversations as well, because there's so many cool people that I've been fortunate enough to connect with on X and Instagram and YouTube as well. So now it's just understanding that these are the results that we've ultimately gotten. 13 conversations, which is a lot more, which is what exactly I wanted to get as well, and also making, or having new friends as a result of that. And I think this is something that has ultimately been one of the most valuable things as well, that has come as a result of posting each and every single day, that at least 1 month someone new pops up and they like connect with me, and ultimately just have conversations and just get far deeper in terms of understanding what they're building and building relationships through that. And I think that is one of the things that has ultimately been somewhat of a good thing that's happened. And now it's just understanding that these are the things that ultimately compound as a result of building out these daily videos. But that means also building out the newsletter, which I also just wanted to build out and also test as well, because I realized that not everyone may see or be getting as much source in terms of the YouTube acts as a specific connection point, but how can I build a certain or a different medium in order to connect with people that may be watching my specific content? So that's where I decided, hey, the results, I wanted to build a newsletter and ultimately scale that newsletter as well, so that we have a different medium that we can ultimately communicate and speak to people as well, and also allows me to post on a weekly basis, just sharing some thoughts and ideas that I may have in terms of building systems and being somewhat known as the systems guy. So that has been somewhat of the results that we've ultimately been able to achieve. And also 63 new subscribers, which I think is super good throughout 135 videos. Getting 63 new subscribers is something that I didn't think was gonna hit, and that is something that I also just wanted to touch on in terms of what's next. What's next is ultimately 360 65 videos. I don't know why I said 360. I was like But yeah, 365, so 1 full year of posting each and every single day. 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. That is one of the things that I ultimately want to push for in terms of what's next, and 1,000 on X as well. So just basically dropping more value, more source on those two specific platforms. I want to just make sure that we're hitting, those specific platforms, those two platforms as hard as possible, and also sharing as much source as we possibly can in terms of the things that I'm learning and also, failing at, and also bringing 5+ new interviews a month. I want to scale those conversations, in terms of people that, we have onto the pods, just chatting and just learning a lot more from them, so that it's ultimately creating as much value as possible for the people that are watching as well, and also just to build relationships with cool people building cool things as well, and also dialing in systems. So basically, one of the things I realized was that, for the builds and, for the internal builds and also for these YouTube videos, one of the things that I needed to super dial in was in terms of the systems for output for me specifically, just how I'm outputting these videos. And that means, taking some time or just having more buffer in terms of creating these videos so that new ideas can flow. Because one of the things that I realized as I was doing this is like go, 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 go ultimately creates that forcing function where I can't be as creative as I possibly can on a day to day in terms of the ideas and different things that I also want to experiment as well. So it's just creating those buffers such that I can, dial in, focus a lot more, on building the internal stuff, and also just building away from the YouTube videos. And then when I come to building these YouTube videos on a day to day, it's more so from a creative standpoint and what is actively, working and failing, and just, communicating that in the most efficient way possible. Just basically getting more efficient in terms of how I am, communicating the value and also what we're doing as well. As well as the weekly newsletter, I want to make sure that we're doubling down on that, just making sure that we're producing as much source as possible on the weekly newsletter, so that it ultimately plays into the three platforms, which are YouTube, X, and the newsletter, which ultimately I'm going to be super, super more active on, and just sharing a lot more of the things that, I'm failing and also, getting right as well, and also focusing on building plus clarity. I think there's a lot of value in terms of, clarity, and I think the modes that ultimately allows, every single thing to then work, which is, getting super specific on the metrics in terms of what targets I ultimately want to hit specifically for YouTube. Because I think, if you see the initial goals, this is something that I ultimately did not have as much specific detail in terms of, how much, for YouTube we're wanting to hit and how much for X. And that ultimately led to me, somewhat having guesswork. And now it's like, hey, we're building for more clarity, but also, we have this specific target, and through this target we're ultimately going to take actions that ultimately build towards that. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to do anything possible to get to the goal, but it's also just taking the time to ultimately just focus on building a lot more and sharpening clarity, such so that we get to the next phase of building through 100 or 365 days each and every single day. But through that, we need to dial in the systems a lot more in terms of production, and also how we're then able to focus in terms of the internal builds, and just sharing that as well. Because, each and every single day that go, go, go forces creativity to somewhat take a dip. So how can I create these buffers such so that I have more time to be more creative and experiment a lot more? And I know that, into the future we're going to scale this up a lot more, and we're going to fail and get some stuff right and some stuff wrong. But ultimately, clarity is going to be the mode that is ultimately going to get us to where we need to get to. So now it's just doubling down on clarity and just moving each and every single day towards the main goal of, just using these platforms as somewhat as a learning machine to learn from other people, and also connect with other people that are building cool things as well, such so that we can then provide as much value as we possibly can, and also scale the level of impact that we ultimately have. And if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to check out my newsletter. It's the first link in the description. And if you want to connect with me, X, LinkedIn, Instagram is just below that. And I will see you guys in the next video.